What's up, friends? That was the whole threatening thing. That was just a little gag. I don't know. I was just trying to make you laugh. That's all. That wasn't a legitimate threat or anything like that. Why would I threaten you? Why would I threaten you, chat? I wouldn't. That's the whole point. It's totally a joke. Totally a joke. Hello, Sinchow. Hello, Brian. Cool J. Once I start that, then I have to say every name, don't I? Sunny Sola, Jack Bird, Genki Horuguchi's Barber, Metal Dipshit, Cauldron of Bats, Carnoba, Smile and Nod Politely, Hello, Knee, just a little goof. Just a little goof. Un petit blague. Un petit blog. That's all. What's up, folks? I'm still sick. I don't know. I'm different sick. I'm differently sick now, but I'm still coughing a lot. I'm really looking forward to not feeling bad. It's very frustrating. It's like the shit was up here in my sinuses, and now it's migrated down here to this area. Very unpleasant. Very unpleasant. I do have like a spicy soup I'm gonna eat here. I got a spicy ramen. Nothing too crazy today. I just made a little ramen here and added a slice of cheese. Added a slice of American cheese.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
What if we smooched in the Rugong Hotel lobby?
What if? What if we didn't have to imagine that? And what if we manifested it into reality? What if that? The wrong type of sicko mode. Oh, I was gonna eat my noodles. All stuffy still. I mean, it hasn't even totally migrated out because I'm still blowing my nose like crazy. How are you doing, chat? What's up? What's up with you? Talk to me. Oh God, I was really for a medium that many people experience on audio only mode. This is not going to be a good one. I apologize to the audio only friends. I'm going to be sniffling and snorting, and I had someone in here yesterday saying I sounded like Trump because I was nasal. Jesus. I wish I was able to sound like Trump more. My Trump impression sucks. I'm like the only person in the fucking world at this point that can't do a proper Trump impression. And I still have people saying, this guy sounds like Trump. Oh. God, I'm so sorry. Good thing you still have your looks. Well, I do have that. I suppose. For now, anyway. For now. Rapidly deteriorating as well. Rapidly deteriorating. Still better than from Mike than Mike from PA Trump impression. Yeah, I haven't heard his. Oilers have the incredible ability to win or lose any game, no matter the situation. Did they lose last night? I'm not watching the NHL playoffs, but I am watching the NBA. I saw another Kings win, another Kings W last night. Ever since they're 2-0, ever since Rob Rousseau becoming a Kings guy. Take that however you want. The beam was lit. The beam was lit. Oilers up 3-1 in the third. Let Kings tie with 17 seconds left and then lost in OT. So this is why I just can't watch hockey, honestly. Like I was saying yesterday, I think, in playoff hockey, a 2-goal lead in playoff hockey is just miserable. When your team has a 2-goal lead in playoff hockey, it's literally just unpleasant to watch. It never feels safe. It almost feels like bad. Like it almost feels like you're losing. It almost feels like you're losing when you have a 2-goal lead in hockey. I don't know. Don't ask me to explain it. I don't know how that makes sense, but it does. Glad, thank you for the clout update, Marty. I'm happy to hear. Should hit 1,100 RTs and 10k likes by the end of the day. That's a doozy. That's a legit viral tweet, Marty. The system works. Again, I don't want to take all the credit. It's a good tweet, first and foremost. It was at 120 likes when I hit the retweet button. I will just say that. I will just say that. It was actually because I saw that it got to 120 without my assistance. Then I was like, okay, I think this one might have some legs. That's what convinced me to give it the extra little boost. Some might say a 2-goal lead is the most dangerous in sports. I don't understand it at all. I mean, you should be happy having a 2-goal lead, but it's just miserable. The dreaded 2-goal lead. The Toronto-Boston game in the first round like 10 years ago, I still haven't recovered. Well, like Metal Dipshit, like I don't even like the Leafs. I don't really watch hockey. I don't have this big investment in the Leafs. But even just watching that video, like there's that one video of the Leafs fans watching the game, and it's just, I get so much secondary sports pain from it, even without being emotionally invested at all. You know? I get secondary sports pain from that because it's just like, oh God, it's just horrible. Just horrible. And they've still never recovered from that. Still. Who are the Leafs playing in this? Are they going to get out of the first round? Like, do people actually think the Leafs are going to get out of the first round in this playoff run? Who are they even playing? No? Who are they even playing? I'll believe it when I see it. I'll believe it when I see it. It's every single year. And even after last year, they were like, run it back. Did they take your Canadian citizenship away if you don't watch hockey? No, but it is a big part of our sort of fake culture. And I know enough that I can talk about it. I'll watch it sometimes. Like if the Canadians are in the playoffs, I'll watch. But I don't care about it that much. I'm more of a basketball fan. They're playing the Lightning? Oh, fucked. They're fucked. They're fucked. I'm sorry to say. Isn't that who beat them? Like, the Lightning beat them in the first round last year after they had was it a 2-game lead, or did they have not only is the 2-goal lead bad, but the 3-1 lead in the series for the Leafs is just treacherous. So they lost to the Lightning after blowing they had 3 opportunities to, if I remember correctly, they had 3 opportunities to put them away last year, didn't, went on to lose in 7. And now they're here next, and they said after the year, they were like, we got to run it back. Next year is going to be different. And they're in the exact same position. I will never believe they're going to win until I see it. I actually think Toronto does it this year. I will never ever believe that it's going to happen until it happens. They could be kissing the cup and Rob would deny it. I just don't believe it. I'm sorry. Sorry. Wow, it's spicy. It's really getting my nose to run now. It's the most unpleasant thing for the people that have to listen to this. I'm sorry. What do we think of this? Someone was saying they want to look on a cover, like on a t-shirt. What about this though? What about this? No one in the history of Twitch has done this. Check this out. Gin, folks. I don't know what the red flavor is, honestly. It's just ultra red. It's just red flavor. I don't know. It's just red flavor. There is a red can with like green trimming on it, which is watermelon. I don't know what flavor the actual, I guess fruit punch, I guess. You're gonna get to 1,000 views today from that. Excuse me just one moment. Let me just go mute myself here. Talk amongst yourselves for 1 sec. Oh my gosh. Sorry. Sorry, folks. That's great. That picture is great. Oh man. That's good. Me with the monster and the soy face and the Stalin book. That's called a dialectic. That's called a dialectic. I think probably like most new members of the community that maybe have some differing viewpoints are going to quickly realize that we're not going to probably be budging on any of these things, and it is in fact them that's going to have to change their viewpoint rather than the other way around. I think probably most people that are new to the community are going to probably come to that conclusion sooner rather than later. I for one hope they stick around though. I really do. And that goes for everybody. Any new community member, even if they're not totally on board with our little project here, our little whatever our ideological spectrum is, or whatever it is. Oh. So what are we talking about today? Racist, vigilante violence, the rise of Republican fascism, Democrats calling people... Oh shit, this is dripping down. Democrats calling people sexist for wanting geriatrics, holding up court appointments to resign, collapse of the U.S. empire. I mean, definitely the last part is something a common topic of discussion. I mean, the main thing that I wanted to talk about today, because I talked about my little back and forth, my ratio of the CBC's Evan Dyer yesterday, talking about this Ukraine business and Lula's comments, and I didn't realize till after the show that he had responded. And then if you saw in the Discord, I was cataloging it there, but got in a little back and forth with CBC's Evan Dyer. So I thought maybe we could talk about that today, and we could talk about this whole argument about state media. State media. What is it? What is state affiliate media? If we live in the West, in a Western liberal democracy, do we have state media? Do we have propaganda? Some people don't think we do, but as we know from our discussions and from doing the reading that we've had to do, Lenin particularly is someone that really helped clarify this for me when you talk about both what the state is and what the state's role is, and how in Western liberal democracy, in a capitalist system, capitalist-owned press is just not, by definitionally, it's not free press. Lenin really helps you understand this. So I think I want to talk a little bit about this whole argument about state media and government-funded media, the whole CBC thing, and what is state media and who qualifies it, who qualifies as state media and who doesn't. I think we can talk a little bit about that today. And all the stuff you mentioned earlier, like about Feinstein and Prime Suspect. Hello, what's up? New community member, first time chatter. All the other stuff you mentioned about Republican fascism and Feinstein and all this kind of stuff will probably come up on the Insurgents podcast. Am I state media? Well, you will be, Brian. After the revolution, once we seize control of the state, we'll get you a little radio program, and you can be. Oh yeah, this is great, Diego. Yeah, I love Professional Hog Groomer. What a great Twitter account. They just have this stupid notion that state media only applies to like a literal propaganda wing of a central government. Well, that's the tricky part, is that I think we have this idea that what's the state? Well, the state's the government. But that's not true, as we've talked about. You know, the government is part of the state, but what's the state? Again, as Lenin teaches us in State and Revolution, which is why it's very important to read that book, is that the state is not just the government. It is a apparatus. It's an apparatus by which the people at the very top of the class structure oppress everyone else on the bottom and exploit them and take from them, take everything for themselves. And our media apparatus is part of that, whether it's funded by the government or not. Our entire media apparatus is part of that structure. That structure, which is inherently working against us and protecting the class interests at the people at the very top, the ownership class, at the expense of everyone else. Let me just change some media settings here. A little bit bright. I'm going to turn down this gain here. It's cool, the new fear-mongering over Chinese spying. Meanwhile, every U.S. corporation sells you ads based on internet search history and literally listens in on your phone conversations. Seriously, we're worried about, like, Chinese spying and spy balloons and all this shit, or TikTok, when every one of us has had this experience where you have a conversation with someone and then moments later you open up Instagram or Facebook and are getting served targeted ads based on the keywords that you were using in the conversation. And we're really it's TikTok is the problem, though. You know, and as we talked about before on this show and other shows that I do talking about this stuff, you know, if China wants your data, they'll get it. It's available on the market, the precious market that these people worship. Our data is all available on there. So if the Chinese want it, I'm sure they have it already. The idea of banning TikTok is going to do anything about that is just completely fucking false. Oh my goodness. Right in the last, I was totally fine. Then right in the last swallow, I got a direct spice thing make pure contact with the back of my throat. Right on the very last swallow. Oh. Ugh. Oh boy. This is a rough start to the stream. This is very rough. It's dangerous out here for streamers. It is. By the way, this is the only place you can get this kind of content. This kind of Leninist breakdown of our capitalist media apparatus, followed by me like choking and gagging on a spice pocket in my noodles. Hilariously, it's slapstick. Hey, congratulations, Lodane. Being productive. Can we get a congratulations, Lodane? Going in the chat, please. It's hard to be productive sometimes. And it's very easy to feel very down on yourself when you're not productive. Oh, good. Good. I was glad to know that clip's going to survive forever now. Good. Hot too. Jesus. Evan Dyer is not a stenographer for Capital Rock. Well, we're gonna get into this. Give me like a few more minutes here to sort of like get rolling, and then we'll get into the main topic of discussion. We will get into this, Old Dutch. We're gonna go and look at his little Evan Dyer's little like professional journalist little tricks from our conversation last night, and the way Evan Dyer was ducking and dodging and weaving and avoiding dealing with any of the substance of that argument that I was making, and then proceeding to like lecture to me like I'm a fucking child. This pretentious I love getting a pretentious lecture, this sanctimonious lecture from one of these fucking nepotism case CBC guys. Love that. Absolutely love that. I love being condescended to by one of these fucking guys. Oh, jeez, I'm sorry, folks. I'm making all kinds of grunts and sniffles and all kinds of different stuff here. Noted international law expert Evan Dyer. That's right. His name's Evan Dyer because he needs to dry his constantly peed pants. As someone pointed out, who was that? I just want to give credit for that burn. Bigger wig. That sick burn. Oh. Evan dry his tears. When you get owned by like a failed musician, communist Twitch streamer, owned in the marketplace of ideas, must Evan dry his tears after? Hey, Dimitri, what's up? I did take like a sinus pill about half an hour right before I started, so hopefully that'll kick in soon as well. You just got defeated in the marketplace of ideas by somebody who thinks CM Punk was good. How do you sleep at night? Marty, come on. Come on now. That's just one of the objectively true things that I believe. Jesus Christ. You just got owned in the marketplace of ideas by a guy who dies to fall damage in a top 10 situation. Oh, man. I posted about that in the Discord, but that was a really bad Fortnite experience last night. Jesus. I was like, I'm old enough now that when I get mad at video games, I don't like react. I don't go, oh, fuck, or like throw stuff or break stuff. You know, I used to get really upset when I was a teenager and stuff, but I don't do that anymore. But yeah, last night I was top 7 in Fortnite with 10 eliminations. Like, I was playing very well. A bunch of like really good sniper eliminations. I'm looking good. Full health, good weapons, approaching the top, like getting to that final kind of circle, good chance at a win, and then somehow died from fall damage while not fighting anybody. And it's like, as soon as it happened, and that's the thing, I don't react anymore. I don't react, but I was just like, just completely stone-faced and just instantly just closed the game. Just like stone-faced, silent, close game. Just move away, get up, move away from it. That was very frustrating. Yeah, it was like a silent, stone-faced rage quit. That's right. I just read your replies to Evan Dyer and they're good. And since you're a better person than me, you didn't make fun of his stupid bullet point format. Well, that's the thing. It's like he had this condescending prick lecture. So I was like, I'll give that right back. I'll give you right back that like HR style fucking condescension, if that's what you want to do. If that's what you want to do, I can give that right back to you. I can give that with the best of them. The passive aggressive. I'm a fucking wasp, all right? You don't think I can give you a passive aggressive lecture? Oh, believe me, I can. Believe you me, Evan. Let's just like put the title up because we're already talking about it, so we might as well continue. I can give a condescending, sanctimonious, passive-aggressive lecture with the absolute best of him. Oh, it's gonna blow my nose one more time. Sorry. Oh, hello. Sorry. Ugh. I still have this like pressure. Like, I blow my nose. I don't know if it was. I blow my nose and I feel like this like pressure here. Like there's like bubbles almost in all the fucking gunk up there. I know that's really gross, but I'm just trying to articulate to folks that I'm still quite under the weather here. Oh, Jesus Christ. Hello, Daka dude. What's up? No, I don't have a humidifier, but it has, over the past week, really helped when I took a shower, so maybe that would really help, wouldn't it, if I had some of that? Oh, Siporowski found an audiobook of Parenti's Inventing Reality. That's good. I just picked up the book, and I'm working on it now, so... I kind of have a hard time whether I should fully take the plunge into inventing reality, but I also picked up Dispatches, the famous Vietnam novel by Michael Hare, which I read like probably 20 years ago, but not for a long time. So I started reading that because I picked that up at the used bookstore the other day. I also ratioed Luke Skywalker. I was kind of on one this weekend. I don't know. sometimes on Twitter you can just feel your power levels rising. And I ratioed Luke Skywalker and the New York Times. I've kind of taken a step back from the posting wars, but I've been diving a little bit more headlong into it over the last couple of weeks. I don't know if anyone saw that someone did like a tweet compilation of the Luke Skywalker thing. Just like John Woo, Rob's thinking, yeah, I'm thinking I'm back. Let's see this here.
It's not hard to see the parallels between the Ukrainians being the rebels and Russia being the evil empire. It's obvious.
I mean, like, it is truly amazing. It's an amazing reaction to be like, for someone to be like, Mark, the people that you're talking to, even me, that I was trying to be very polite, right? I was trying to be polite. Sorry, the link, here's the tweet here. I was trying to be polite. But it's an amazing reaction when someone's like, you know, those people that you were talking to, I know you think you're trying to do a good thing here, but the people that you're talking to are actual Nazis. And rather than being like, maybe I should like take a step back here and really think about what I've been led to believe about this. He's just like, I support them, period. And it's like, okay. Okay. It's the same thing as denounce Dalai Lama and China bad. Yeah, that's right. I find that's kind of a weird reaction. Frankly, like if I was having a conversation, like is he working with an org? I would say he's working with an org called the State Department. Yeah, if you want to call it that. Yeah, I don't know. Like if I was having like a pleasant conversation with people and someone later told me like, you know, those people that you were having this nice conversation with are actual literal Nazis. Did you know that? Me personally, I would probably be like, oh, wow, that makes me really uncomfortable. I obviously don't support Nazism. So what's going on with that? Maybe I should have a little think about that. Maybe I should have a little think and really try to unpack what's going on here. But this like knee-jerk reaction to be like, I don't care. I don't care. I'm against the Russia bad. Russia bad. That's your answer. It's like, You know who else supported working with Nazis because Russia bad? The Nazis. As well as many other countries.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Thank you very much, Dimitri. It perfectly encapsulates the liberal ideology. Instead of a mea culpa, they deny reality and double down because it's mainstream to support Nazis. Yeah. I mean, it's weird. It's weird to me. Especially the whole thing about, like, the obvious parallels between Russia, the evil empire, invading and the rebels being the Ukrainians. And and the obvious, like, fucked up part about that, which is that the evil empire in the Star Wars movie that he's the star of is meant to be the U.S. Empire, which the creator of the series made that explicitly clear. Also combined like the U.S. Empire specifically in Vietnam with the original film, but also using fascist Nazi iconography to really drive the point home. And then he's sitting there talking to Nazis and be like, you know who the real evil empire from Star Wars is? Russia. And it's like, man. No. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I need to rewatch the trilogy and fast forward through all the Luke nonsense. I mean, the trilogy still is fucking great. You know, I still like the guy as an actor. My son loves Mark Hamill. He's the voice of the Joker. He always talks about Mark because my son's obsessed with like voice actors. He wants to know who's the voice actor in like every cartoon and whether they've voice acted in other things. So he loves Mark Hamill. You know, nothing against the guy. Well, it's kind of a little bit something against the guy now, actually, but. This stuff is not good. This stuff is not so great. The supporting Nazism, I think I would probably, if I was close to Mark Hamill, I would be like, tell him to maybe tone down on that kind of stuff. It's easy. Azov is the Rebel Alliance. Right sector is Katniss Evergreen or whatever. And Bandera was an IRL Harry Potter. There we go. No problem. You know, one... yeah, I remember he did the... Thank you, Carrier Wave. I know he did the, like... voiceover for the air raid siren as well. He's been... It is a Reddit ass war. And he's been implicated in that from moment one. I would really like to watch Revenge of the Sith again as well. I think that would be a good community watch. Revenge of the Sith, I think, is still great. I don't know if it's contrarian to still uphold the prequels. It's kind of become cool to like the prequels now, maybe a little bit. So, especially in the wake of the really shitty Disney trilogy. The prequels obviously have a lot of problems, but politically, I think have some fairly interesting things to say, especially Revenge of the Sith, which is literally a film explicitly about how liberal democracy enables fascism. That's literally explicitly what the message of this film is. It's too bad the movie is awful. I don't know. There's things I like about it. I don't think it's perfect, but I enjoy it. It's probably in my top 5 favorite Star Wars films.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Think about it. Are we supposed to take out Spider-Man and SpongeBob? They don't have any heroes. We have a country in front of us with a large population and a large landmass, but it doesn't have any heroes. All of their heroes are cartoon characters. They're all fictional. Thank
you, Dimitri. I saw our friend of the stream, Amanda, aka Cat Content Only, share that quote yesterday in relation with this Mark Hamill thing. And God, it's like, I don't think anyone has ever cooked America quite as much as that guy did. Like that's just like one of the best burns ever, I think. It's because it's so accurate. He absolutely just annihilated the entire country. God. It's brutal. You burnt. That cleric has never heard of Kamala Harris. That's correct. Oh. I finished my energy drink, I finished my soup, but I'm just gonna get more beverages because I'm still like dehydrated and I still need to keep drinking stuff. So I'm just gonna go grab that. grab a little beverage there, and I shall return in just a moment. I want to talk about all this stuff, but at the same time, I really talked a lot yesterday, and I'm still sick, so I would also like to maybe have a brief discussion on this, and then maybe like rest a little and relax a little bit, and wheel in the substitute teacher VCR kind of thing, and maybe the latter half of the stream, just maybe I can sit back and relax a little bit, because I'm still not feeling super well, and it's not doing me all kinds of favors to be talking for hours at a time. I also have to do a podcast later. I really loved Boyhood. The Boyhood film.
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
Comrade Social Distancing. Diego, thank you for the 5 gifted subs. Thank you, Diego. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate all the support. I really liked Boyhood, though. It's really good. It's tragic, too. That Ethan Hawke's arc in that film is fucking tragic. Going from, like, in the early 2000s, stealing George Bush signs to becoming, like, basically like a McCain, like, proto-MAGA, like, evangelical by the end of the movie. For sure. I mean, I watched it also, Marty, like, when my kid was a baby or toddler, and he was like sitting right next to me, like sleeping while I was watching the movie, and it hit pretty hard. The whole thing hit pretty hard. Just 1 second. I'm just gonna get a beverage. I'll be right back. Okay. The China poverty vid I posted yesterday might be good if you don't have anything in mind. I only watched the first 10 minutes, but the host seemingly goes on a deep dive into the granular details of how they're eliminating poverty. That sounds really interesting. I mean, when we watched CGTN content on that in the past, I found it very interesting. So that could be something good to throw on as well. Where were we? I don't know. I don't even know. Are we in the serious discussion? Are we talking about films? Are we talking about Star Wars? I don't even know. I don't even know what we're doing. Call-in show and you can give your voice a break. The call-in shows don't. It feels like it needs to be late night in order for that vibe to work for me. I like the idea of the late night smoke-filled room call-in vibe. I've got plenty of Java and Chesterfield Kings, but I feel like crying. An independent station. WJAZ. With jazz and conversation. From the foot of Mount Belzoni. Okay. So Mark Hamill. I'm sick here. I'm sick, and I'm still singing. I'm still singing and dancing and entertaining you folks. This is how much I care about the chat. This is how much I care about doing this program and providing people with informative and interesting and entertaining and education content. I just noticed there are super reactions in Discord now. I saw that as well, and I tried to do one, but I don't get how it works. It just brought me to the emotes page. I didn't know how it worked. I tried to do a super react yesterday, and it didn't happen. I don't know. That's very refreshing. It's very, very refreshing. Super reactions. Well, I guess we can talk about this Evan Dyer thing. Check my notifications. My notifications have been going kind of mad because of all this discourse that's been going on. Do 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 do. Let me just like click around here for a moment. Hey, Netlocked, what's up? By the way, for the succession heads, out here, before we dive into this beef with Evan Dyer thing, excuse me. Brief survey from the chat. Was Kendall Logan Roy, was it underlined or was it crossed out? What do you think? Well, that's the only. It's not a spoiler, Metal Dipshit. That's all. That's all. That's the only question. Which, out of context, I don't think really means anything all that much. I love it though. I thought it was so great. I was hearing from the Succession podcast as well how they really tried to do that line in a perfect way to make it totally ambiguous. I thought it's so brilliant. Why would he underline? Because Kendall's the number one boy. That's why. Because Kendall's his number one boy. Watched episode 1 of Succession the other day and loved it. Just muted the stream to avoid spoilers. I will try to continue talking about it without revealing any actual plot points. It was clever visually. It worked so well too. Absolutely. I got to rewatch the episode though because I was kind of dozing off. And I fell asleep during that actual board meeting scene. So I got to rewatch it. Yeah, I love that in a humorous vein. Yeah, between Frank and Carl, that was great. Yeah, you tried to arrest Dad 12 times since then, but Sinchal, I would go back to the press conference at the end of season 2. If you remember the press conference when Kendall, goes against Logan, this is kind of a spoiler for season 2, I guess. So don't listen. Don't listen. But it has this brilliant reaction shot of Logan in that moment, and he's got the barest hint of a smile. It's the barest hint of a smile. So was that the point when he knew that Kendall did have that dog in him, and he knew that he was a killer? He was capable of doing what needed to be done? That's the question. They didn't know the dates of the letter or the underline, and we have no real grasp on the amount of time the entire show has spanned. That's what's so genius about that narrative device, is because you can project whatever you want onto it. That's the brilliant thing about it. There's no answer. There's no right or wrong. There's no objective truth to it. You can just, like, whatever you like. It's like the briefcase in Pulp Fiction. You can just, like, project whatever you want onto it, and it makes sense. You're not watching Succession, Lodane? You should get on board. You should watch it. You should join the Succession squad. It's really good. But anyway, we can move past this. I do enjoy catching up with folks, and I do enjoy posting all the memes and whatever in our Succession channel. You don't need to mute, okay? We'll move past this now. We don't need to talk about Succession anymore. Although I am all the way in on Kendall's squad, though. I'll just say that. Although, dang, you're watching shows and doing stuff too. I know you have shit to do, but I know you're gaming and watching shows and doing stuff. Anyway. God damn it. Excuse me one sec. Oh, I'm so tired of this. So tired of this. Okay, state media. State media. So we talked about Evan's tweet yesterday. Again, professional journalist Evan, who's sharing this clip of Lula da Silva talking about Ukraine and articulating an idea, which, as I pointed out to Evan, which didn't seem to make any impact on him whatsoever. Articulating an idea that is widely held across the world. That it's not, when you talk about Russia and Ukraine, it's not just this one-sided good versus evil thing, but that the US and Canada and NATO played a role in provoking it and have played a significant role in prolonging it way longer than it needed to go on. That's all. That's all he was saying. And again, this is not some like Putinist Kremlin propaganda thing. This is like what the majority of the world believes, you know? Sometimes when we say like the world stands with Ukraine and all this stuff, what we mean is all of the formerly colonialist, predominantly white countries stands with Ukraine, and anything outside that narrative is like Kremlin propaganda. Completely false, though. Most of the world actually takes this kind of nuanced view on it. They're either like neutral on it, or they openly support Russia's side in the conflict. So when Lula talks about that, there's more than, it's not just about Russia and Ukraine. There's more than one country that was involved in this. The West has prolonged it, and they helped provoke it. This shouldn't be controversial. This is widely held. This is a view that's widely held throughout the world, throughout the non-Western world. And the way Evan again, professional journalists who are not supposed to editorialize and like inject their own personal beliefs. I know Evan thinks that he's totally impartial journalist and doesn't even have personal beliefs or ideology, or as he explains to me in this conversation, has this belief in the rule of international law, this fervent belief in international law that he applies to everybody. So he doesn't think that he even has an ideology, and he doesn't think that he does editorialize or inject his personal beliefs. But then he obviously does. Look, when I talk about that completely uncontroversial stance that Lula articulated there, and then he says Lula in China falsely claims the decision to start the Ukraine war was made by two countries, and then suggesting that Ukraine asked to be invaded, which again, that's not what Lula said at all. That's Evan Dyer's own personal editorialized interpretation that he included in that. That's not anywhere near what Lula said in that clip. And then he says he also blamed the U.S. and EU for prolonging the conflict by helping Ukraine defend itself. Sorry, but that's true. That's just true. That's just objectively true. That's just objectively true. I'm sorry to say. Yes, the US and EU have prolonged the conflict by pumping billions of dollars worth of weapons into Ukraine. And as I and Lula and others have argued, helped provoke the conflict by pumping billions of dollars into Ukraine prior to February 2020, or whenever it was at this point, 2022. They've been pumping billions of dollars into Ukraine prior to that. The international rule of law oversaw 1 million Iraqi deaths. Well, this is where Evan tries to create some distance as well, because he says, well, I think the Iraq war was illegal against international law, just as I think the invasion of Ukraine was illegal. This is how he tries to maintain this stance of objectivity. I would be interested to know whether Evan Dyer, what he was saying in 2002 and 2003 about the Iraq war, if there's evidence that Evan Dyer was using whatever journalistic platform he had at that time to argue that the war was illegal and argue against the war, I would be happy to see it. I am not familiar. I haven't seen it. I've learned about a lot of these people, again, in spite of myself. So if he was actually using his platform at that time to denounce the war, I would be happy to see evidence of that. Maybe he was. I don't want to assume that he wasn't. Maybe he was. Or is he only saying it now with the benefit of hindsight and years later when it's no longer controversial or unpopular to say this is an illegal war? That's kind of what I'm interested to know. It's easy to say that you're against the Iraq war now, but what were you saying in 2003? That's kind of my question. I mean, maybe he was against it. I don't know. I would be interested to know if he did think the war was illegal, as he claims in this thread. What was he doing at that time to promote that idea? Because not a lot of mainstream journalists in Canada or the United States were making that point in 2003. That's a good question as well, Metal Dipshit. If he thinks the Iraq war was illegal, does he support war crime charges against U.S. officials? It's a good question. I don't know. That's something that Evan would have to answer. I'm not sure. You know what? I better tweet that I'm talking about this, because I have a tweet that people are sharing right now about this. So maybe I should promote that I'm doing the stream under that tweet. Okay. So that would be, we'll get to that though. But that would be my question when it comes to Iraq and Evan Dyer's, fixation on international law. As he talks about, he equates the invasion of Iraq with Ukraine and says, well, they're both illegal and I'm against them both. I'm interested to know what Evan was saying in 2003. I'm not claiming one of Evan Dyer's forefathers committed the Armachar massacre in India in 1919, but the English colonel who did it was Colonel Reginald Dyer. Oh boy. Oh boy. And anyway, when we're having this conversation about state media, I think this is an interesting place to start. We're going to get into the whole like Elon Musk CBC thing, but I think this is a good question. Like, is Evan Dyer part of a state media apparatus? He would obviously tell you that no, he's not, and that no one tells him what to say, and that he doesn't get kind of bullet points or talking points that he has to talk about. As we know, that is not accurate. And as we know, CBC, while it takes government funding, is only one arm of our sort of state media apparatus in the West, in which all corporate media is a part of. And like as Chomsky would say, if Evan Dyer, it's not that people tell him what to think, but if he believed anything different, he would not be in the position that he's in today. Say Palestine, and listen, to give Evan credit, I've heard, I don't really know, but people have said about Evan Dyer that he's better than most journalists on Israel-Palestine. So we'll see. But does he apply the same rigorous critique that he does to Russia and the invasion of Ukraine to Palestine? That's a second question. My understanding, though, is that he is better on this than many journalists in this country. So, if that's true, credit to him for that. I'm trying to be as fair as possible because, as you know, I'm fair and balanced. I'm fair and balanced in all my journalistic endeavors that I participate in. So here's my response, right? Again, I don't think this should be controversial. You do realize that this is what the vast majority of the non-Western world believes. Maybe you should consider whether it's actually you who are wrong about this, which is a pretty satisfying ratio as well. Just pointing that out. This whole thing about what Lula's saying there, like it's some kind of like controversial thing or Kremlin or Beijing propaganda. What Lula is saying in there is just articulating the viewpoint of the vast majority of the people in the world about this conflict. That's my only point that I was making here. Whether or not CBC is state media, it's bland, centrist pablum that does nothing to challenge power. Yeah, and you know what? CBC is capable of doing some decent journalism. But ultimately, CBC is part of a journalistic class which is upholding the status quo, and that doesn't meaningfully challenge power in any way, like you're pointing out. It's not like CBC, in an effort to appeal to all different viewpoints, are participating in this marketplace of ideas. Platforms people like me, who have a totally different perspective, who do challenge power in our economic system or in the geopolitical sphere, of course they don't. And that's part of this kind of like this status quo that CBC is part of upholding. The West didn't impose fundamentalist rule in Afghanistan. It isn't the West that won't let girls go to school. Afghanistan is suffering primarily because of the Taliban and the attitudes that gave rise to the Taliban. Evan Dyer. Is that an actual quote, Dimitri? The amazing thing about that quote is, and as you'll see in this thread, he complains, Evan, about tankies like me who just blame the West for everything, right? They just blame the West for everything. They got this double standard. They blame the West for every single conflict.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
They blame the West for every single conflict, and they let all these like human rights abusing authoritarian regimes off the hook. Thank you, Dimitri, for sharing that. There it is. The West didn't impose fundamentalist rule in Afghanistan. It isn't the West that won't let girls go to school. Afghanistan is suffering primarily because of the Taliban and the attitudes that gave rise to the Taliban. Ironically, the West did, in fact, impose fundamentalist rule on Afghanistan. As we've learned about on this program, when the PDPA, the legitimate government of Afghanistan in the late 80s, was trying to create a socialist system in Afghanistan that promoted and supported and upheld women's rights, that promoted education and literacy, and had all these progressive social policies, what did the West do? The West came in and armed and funded these reactionary fundamentalists to destroy that. And when the PDPA reached out to the Soviet Union for help and the Soviet Union invaded, We then, after encouraging and supporting this proxy war, sat back and said, oh, look at this barbaric Russian invasion. Doesn't that kind of sound familiar? It sounds a little bit familiar to me, doesn't it? But we quite literally did impose this fundamentalist rule. When there was an effort in Afghanistan to destroy the power of these religious fundamentalists, we were on the side of the fundamentalists. So we quite literally did impose fundamentalism. That's not even a remote exaggeration. Which is the amazing thing. That's the thing that Evan just doesn't seem to realize. Like he's either ignorant to it or just completely unwilling to interrogate this anyway. So anyway, here is my take. You do realize this is what the vast majority of the non-Western world believes. This guy, Warren, who seems nice, I don't know, says, oh, that's a bad take. And, you know, since that kind of annoys me, I don't think Warren, whoever you are, your friendly neighborhood commie propaganda outlet, I don't think you know more about Lula, the president of Brazil, about this subject, or the large number of people around the world that believe in that viewpoint. You know, I think it's a little bit arrogant to be like, whoa, no, I know more. I know more than all these people, you know? So yeah, I find that kind of annoying. And he says, okay. Our friend Swirly of My Life says, it is okay. And this guy says, I don't understand the point of having debate around this. If the point is that the West stoked the war into happening, then the bar is so low that virtually any conflict on Earth can be blamed on the West. That's right, Warren. And here's where Evan springs into action. And here's where we're going to see the ideology. Again, Evan Dyer, I'm sure if you asked him, would never dream of suggesting that he has some kind of like ideology that he's injecting into his journalism. He's just a straight shooter, fair and balanced journalist who just has no ideology and is just has this kind of outlook of calling balls and strikes, right? I'm sure that's what he would say if you asked him about it. But here's where you see the ideology creep in, right? Here's what he says. He says, Warren, the whole point is to blame any and all conflict on Earth on the West. For the crew you're debating with, this has always been the point. You or I might condemn both the U.S. invasion of Iraq and the Russian invasion of Ukraine as unprovoked and illegal. They never will. So again, drawing the comparison between Iraq and Ukraine, and we've broken that down as well before, how that analogy kind of falls apart a little bit as well, considering, I know I've talked about it before, but just to reiterate again, you know, what are the differences between the Iraq war and the invasion of Ukraine? Number one, Iraq is around the world from America. It's tens of thousands of miles away, has nothing to do, would pose no threat to America whatsoever. Number one. Number two, all of the weapons of mass destruction and all the things that we claimed were the reasons for the invasion that posed a threat to America were complete bullshit, were total lies. So that's two things. On those 2 points, Ukraine is Russia's next door neighbor. Historically, a long tradition of being part of, if not the same country, part of the same society, an integral part of the same society, a key cog in the Soviet Union. A long history of friendship and cooperation between these two nations, these two cultures, very similar cultures. So it's not halfway around the world, it's right next door. Number two, all the justifications that Russia used to invade Ukraine, whether or not you agree with the invasion or not, whether you denounce it or not, I think it's illegal or not. NATO expansion, these fascist militias in Ukraine.
This is some guy, Rob Russo, some leftist based in Canada. I was turned on to this sick individual, and I found this.
Grom, thank you for the raid. Thank you, Grom. Welcome. Bring it in, Grom Raiders. What is up? Thank you for joining us. Welcome in. Smash the follow button. Smash the follow button. I'm Rob. Hello. Nice to meet you. What is up? So, I'm just talking about this conversation I had with state propagandist Evan Dyer of CBC, and breaking down what his points are and what he gets wrong, and how Evan Dyer is a stenographer for state power, which while still holding this idea that he's like some objective journalist. So yeah, Iraq and Ukraine. Number one, Ukraine, Russia's next door neighbor. Number two, all of the bullshit that were used to justify the war in Iraq, weapons of mass destruction, anthrax, support for Al-Qaeda, all these things, complete bullshit, total lies. Whereas when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, you look at NATO expansion, You look at the Euromaidan, these neo-Nazi militias, NATO pumping in billions of dollars worth of arms. Whether you think that justifies the invasion or not, or whether you condemn the invasion or think it's illegal or not, those were real things that were happening. That's not that's not Kremlin propaganda. These are real, actual things. NATO did indeed expand directly up to their border after they repeatedly said, stop expanding to our border or we're going to consider that a threat to our security. Whether you like it or not, those are real things that were happening. And number 3, as brutal as the invasion has been, I don't want to downplay the violence that's happened. If you look at the shock and awe campaign on Baghdad versus the way Russia has engaged with Kiev and the capital, no comparison. I'm sorry, no comparison. There hasn't been this shock and awe bombing campaign targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure in Kiev that we saw in Baghdad in 2003. Zero comparison between these two things. Sorry, just one sec. Are you sure about that? I'm pretty sure, yeah. I don't think there's been this... I don't think you can compare the bombing campaign that we saw in Baghdad in moment 1 of the war, the Iraq war. They immediately bombed the capital into fucking smithereens. There's been bombing in Kiev, but nowhere near to the same extent, though. Anyway, I'm not trying to downplay any violence that's happened. I'm not. I don't support the invasion. I think war is terrible and it should be avoided at all costs. But I'm just pointing out where that I think this analogy between the invasion of Iraq and the invasion of Ukraine is a little bit flimsy. And people like Evans say well, they're both illegal. And look at me, I'm just calling balls and strikes. Iraq illegal, Ukraine illegal, while ignoring all those other contextual elements. Yeah, other parts of Ukraine are a ruin. I don't think anyone would deny that. Yeah, of course not. I mean, again, it is a war that's been going on, so obviously that is true. Oh God. Anyway, so let's continue. So you or I might condemn the U.S. invasion of Iraq and the Russian invasion of Ukraine as unprovoked and illegal. They never will. And that's the thing. I will condemn the invasion because I'm against war, and I have condemned it many times, and I've said Putin bad many times as well, despite Evans' statement to the contrary. But no, I'm not going to say that it's unprovoked because it was very clearly provoked. Again, that's not just my opinion. That's not Kremlin propaganda. That's what Lula was articulating in the statement that he was referencing there. That's what the vast majority of the world believe, that yes, NATO and the West did play a significant role in provoking the invasion. So no, I'm not going to say it's unprovoked because it was provoked. And again, we can hold two ideas in our mind at the same time. Just because it's provoked doesn't mean that you think it's justified. But it was absolutely provoked. He says, if a Western democratic country makes war on an authoritarian country, that is Western aggression. And first of all, the whole Western democratic versus authoritarian, that's an interesting framework as well. Where of course the Canada and the US are these Western liberal democracies, and any country that doesn't have a Western style liberal democratic system is authoritarian. That in and of itself is Evan injecting his ideology into the discussion. Mr. Braddock, I'm sorry, but I just don't agree with that. Russia's not worthy of excuses or whataboutism. Russian fascism is the reason for this. Fuck. Putin is literally trying to rebuild the Russian Empire. I don't really think that's accurate. And I don't think Putin is a good guy. I don't think modern Russia is a great place. There's a lot of things that I really think are grotesque about it. That is true. But Russia repeatedly said, as I pointed out yesterday, Russia repeatedly said, here's our red line. We have a red line here. Stop expanding NATO right up to our border. Stop arming Ukraine. Stop pumping arms into Ukraine. They said that repeatedly over and over and over and over again. And Canada and the US and the Western countries just refused to listen. That's why you had people like John Mearsheimer geopolitical analysts who are not leftists or pro-Putin people. That's why they were saying years ago, what we're doing right now is going to get Ukraine wrecked. They were saying that because they were just listening to what Russia and Putin was saying. So if we didn't want that to happen, we should have stopped doing the things that we were doing to contribute to that happening. You know, I don't think that's like that controversial to say. Oh, was he getting on one about USSR imperialism too? Okay, that's good. There was also, as I pointed out before, the Minsk agreements. You know, Russia was actually negotiating prior to the invasion. They tried to follow a diplomatic route. And people like Angela Merkel have openly admitted that the Minsk agreements were always bullshit, and that was always just a ploy to buy time to continue funding and arming these militias in the first place. So, like, I think we can point out the horror of war, and we can say, yeah, no matter what the context, it doesn't justify a horrible invasion. We can say that, but this idea that it's just this like one-sided good versus evil, black and white thing is just not accurate. It's not historically accurate. So, it's not a realistic assessment of what has actually gone on here. They're going the race science route of the Russian psyche. Exactly. The only people that are violent. The only people that are violent and colonialists. You know? The only people, the Russians, they have this violent gene where they just love to inflict violence on people. Not like us, though. Not like us here in the enlightened Western liberal democracy that we live in. Ugh. So let's continue this though. If he says, and if an authoritarian country makes war on a democratic country, that is Western provocation. The West made them do it. Evan, the fantasies about Nazis, etc., are just window dressing. The fantasies, and Carrier Wave. I agree with you. I know what you're saying when you point this out. Like, what should they have done? And that's the fundamental question that I think people have a really difficult time grappling with. You know. I think more people should really sit down and think about that question and really look at the last 10 years and what the West has been doing versus what they did, and maybe ask themselves some real critical questions about that. Not enough people are doing that. Right, not America or Canada that have continued to systematically exterminate indigenous people of color at large, and that's not even bringing up the things Mexico has done. I mean, we
simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
The Russians have Mongol blood, don't you know? Western liberal who swears they don't subscribe to race science. Seriously, yeah, they all love to reach for the fucking calipers. These anti-racist Western liberals. Another whole thing, as we've talked about endlessly before as well, is about Putin, the whole Putin bad thing. Well, what's Putin doing there? Why is Putin the leader of Russia? As Evan would say, oh, you blame the West for everything. But guess what? Putin is not in power in the first place. Modern Russia, such as it is, doesn't exist were it not for, yet again, Western interference. You know, maybe we should have left the Soviet Union alone. Maybe we should not have deliberately and intentionally overthrown the Soviet Union, leading to this massive human rights calamity, leading to a decade of total abject humiliation and devastation for Russian people and people across the former Soviet republics, leading to a power vacuum that someone like an opportunist like Putin was more than happy to fill. Putin he's a monstrous person who benefited personally from the collapse of the Soviet Union. You know? But Evan would say, oh, that's just you're just suggesting that the West was involved with that is just preposterous. Again, Evan is the one that is completely blind to or is intentionally obfuscating the role of the unequivocal global hegemon, the United States of America, in which the global criminal cartel that the United States of America is the leader of, and that countries like Canada and the UK and Australia and others are junior partners in. Evans just doesn't see that. He doesn't see the role, the obvious role of this massively powerful hegemonic world power in animating these events. And he suggests that it's some kind of tanky delusion to suggest that the West is involved, deeply implicated in these geopolitical affairs. Which is nonsense. And again, as much as Evan would suggest that he doesn't have any kind of like ideology in his journalism, that is ideology. When you're ignoring or obscuring the role that the West plays in these conflicts, then you're being intensely ideological. But look at this as well. The fantasies about Nazis are just window dressing. The fantasies about Nazis, like to say nothing of like the mainstream reporting that's been done on this. Far-right extremists in Ukraine brag that they've received training from the Canadian forces. There's been plenty of like mainstream corporate media journalism about these Nazis in Eastern Ukraine and our role in promoting them and providing them with weapons and training. Like, it's not the idea that it's just a fantasy. Like, literally before the conflict, there's CNN and all kinds of different Western corporate media outlets that did plenty of legitimate journalism on this. And Evan, non-ideological, serious journalist, Evan, completely hand waves that away as a fantasy. So completely hand waves away the role that the West plays in these conflicts or in other geopolitical affairs, completely hand waves away the reality, the widely reported on reality of these Nazis in Ukraine. Prior to the conflict and over the last year and a half, how many fucking interviews have we seen with Ukrainian officials and military people? And in every fucking one, there's the UPA flag, there's pictures of Bandera, there's the sun and rad, there's other fascist symbols. Like, this is the idea that he's just saying, oh, that's just a fantasy. Oh, it's just a fantasy. That's just preposterous. Like, seriously. And Evan would style himself as being some kind of like objective journalist, not only ignoring the obvious role that the world's major global hegemon plays in these situations, but just like, oh yeah, the evidence of that Nazi problem that we are supporting, that we're arming and funding and training and upholding and diplomatically supporting these very people. Oh, that's just a fantasy. Oh, that's just a fantasy, according to Evan. They'll never admit they fell for the propaganda, or Evan will never admit that he is himself a propagandist. I saw that as well, Graham, about the military instructors in Taiwan. It's getting real. I don't know. We're going to see if China is able to not take the bait in the same way that Russia has. But China in the same way that Russia had, China is saying very openly. I have another saved tweet about this. President Xi said to Biden, "Take this shit seriously. President Xi said to Biden, I'm not going to be the president that loses Taiwan. It's not going to happen." They're just like Russia did. China is saying exactly what their red line is, and we're continuing to push right up against it. So when the same fucking thing happens, if it does, all people like Evan are going to be out there wagging their fingers at me and others for pointing this shit out. But no, that's what they're saying. They're being very clear about this, just as Russia was clear about it. God, what an amazing statement. The fantasies about Nazis. And the whole thing about, I think, the idea of, blame any and all conflict on Earth on the West. And this statement, when is this from? February 2023. The West didn't impose fundamentalist rule in Afghanistan. That's remarkable. That's really remarkable. Just completely ignoring the role of the West in both Afghanistan and Ukraine. Really fantastic stuff. And again, if you asked Evan, he would tell you that he's some like objective journalist and that CBC is in no way some kind of state media apparatus. But we're seeing the ways that Evan, through his mainstream objective J-school style journalism, is upholding a very specific ideological agenda on behalf of the ownership class of Canada and the United States. Another DYER banger. This is amazing. This guy's truly an amazing person. What an amazing mind. Africa has a lot of residual sympathy for Russia because of Soviet support for decolonization. Yeah, you think? Yeah, as I was saying yesterday, these places in Africa, remember who was colonizing them and enslaving them, and who was sending them aid and weapons and materially supporting their anti-colonial struggles. And then we say, why does Russia support Putin? Oh, it's just a mystery. It's just a total mystery. And they forget Ukraine was part of the USSR. Now it's not, though. That's the thing, Evan. Now it's not part of the USSR, and now it's being armed and funded by Now it's being armed and funded and supported by the very same people that were trying to colonize them and enslave them. So yeah, that's the fucking difference. They didn't forget that Ukraine was part of the USSR. They see their former colonial overlords or current colonial overlords, because neocolonialism never went away. They see them now supporting Ukraine, and they see the writing on the wall, and they understand the context of what's going on. Jesus Christ, Evan. The crew you're debating with, he's so condescending. And this guy Warren, he says he's a fan of me. I don't want to shit on Warren. I don't agree with what he was saying, and I think he's, that's not great, but he says, I'm a big fan of Rob Rousseau. I think this is the first time I've ever seen him say anything I didn't agree with, but I watched fairly closely as this conflict unfolded. I was in IRC chat with people in Kiev each night of the revolution in 2014. And this is when you get also this anecdotal, I'm friends with a bunch of Ukrainian nationalists that supported the Euromaidan. What's going on? I'm listening to the Ukrainians. Well, okay, but which ones though? That's kind of the question. Which ones? I don't doubt that there's many people in Ukraine that are nationalists that did support the Euromaidan and do want to integrate with NATO and the EU. I don't doubt that whatsoever, and do want to get support from NATO and do want to go and fight Russians. I don't deny that whatsoever. That doesn't mean that you have to agree with them, though. I was chatting to Nazis all night. Fuck. I don't want to suggest that every single person in Ukraine that's kind of become part of this sort of nationalist project is a Nazi, I think I'm sure there's many people that, for whatever reason, are on board with that project, but you do have to also look around at who their partners are in that, and kind of maybe ask some critical questions about why they're partnering up with these open fascists, and why they have these crossover in beliefs about Ukrainian identity and nationalism that is shared with these open neo-Nazi groups. I think that's probably the problematic part of that. Here's some more tricky shit from Evan as well. There's a whole other conversation with Warren here. Again, I don't want to be too mean to Warren here. I want to focus on Evan Dyer's role in this conversation. He says, then you know that the Ukrainian left is entirely on board with the Ukrainian government. Evan, that's not true. That's not true, Evan. That's, again, objective journalist Evan Dyer editorializing. That's not a factual statement. The Ukrainian left entirely on board with the Ukrainian government. Does that include the socialist and communist parties and trade unionists that have been banned over the last several years, and especially accelerated over the last year and a half? How any remotely Russian sympathizing or socialist party has been framed as being traitors. These people are being beaten and tied to poles and assaulted and imprisoned. So the idea that the Ukrainian left is entirely on board with the Ukrainian government, as serious objective journalist Evan Dyer says, that is not true whatsoever. The socialists and communists just agree that they should have been banned. Exactly. That's Evan Dyer editorializing. That's his own personal view of the situation, which is in no way tethered to reality, the actual reality of what's happened. Type Iran into this MF search on Twitter. The dude is an imperialist dog. I don't doubt it, Dimitri. I'm sure there's all kinds of interesting things in there. The Ukrainian left doesn't exist anymore. You can literally be put into prison for singing the Internationale. I mean, it's just a preposterous statement. The Ukrainian left is entirely on board with the Ukrainian government. Just a totally factually incorrect and outrageous statement on the part of Evan there. Yeah, they're National Socialists, which makes them left-wing. There you go. Yeah. It's right there in the name. Exactly right. Are there any links or sources on these? Otherwise, we're doing the same I know a guy thing that we're mocking the other dude for. There's plenty of reporting on this. There's a ton of reporting on this. This is from this is not even during the war. Is fucking Amnesty, is Amnesty International enough? You know, I know it's not sensible to, it's not reported on anymore. Amnesty International. This is from 2015, after the Euromaidan protest, which NATO and America especially were deeply implicated in. Shortly after the Euromaidan protest, in which this pro-NATO, pro-EU government was installed with the help of the Western imperialists, which of course Evan would deny. Evan DYER would deny this. This is 2015. Communist Party ban, decisive blow for freedom of speech in the country. As much as we like to talk about Ukraine being this like democracy, this like Western style democracy that Russia's just being mean to and bullying, it's not at all a democracy. And this idea that this completely false idea that the Ukrainian left is entirely on board with the Ukrainian government is proven to be totally completely incorrect by a simple Google search to talk about this years ago, 2015, the banning of these communist parties. So these are mutually exclusive things. The Ukrainian left can't be entirely on board with the Ukrainian government when it's literally illegal to be a member of one of these left-wing parties. This is not just me saying I know a guy. There's been plenty of documentation on this. Again, it's become unfashionable to report on this in the conflict because now it's helping Putin to talk about it, but there's been more than enough. There's been plenty of serious reporting on this. They're entirely on board with the Ukrainian government and the need to defend the country, and many of them are currently in uniform. The split in this thread is what happened in the Western left after Prague 68, where the word tanky comes from, which was another CIA-backed attempted color revolution, of course, which Evan would also deny. The irony here is that at least these tankies were supporting an ideologically aligned power. Putin's Russia, with its orthodox Christian social conservatism, anti-LGBT, militant nationalism, and czarist iconography, looks far more like a fascist country than Ukraine ever could. That I would disagree with as well, considering like all those things that he just said could be used to describe the exact nationalist, anti-Soviet version of Ukraine that is being created right now and that people like Evan support. So, I mean, all those things are totally ideologically similar. As much as we try to like pink wash the Ukrainian government, suggest that it's like a great place to be an LGBTQ person, I don't think that is accurate in any way. And anyway, I agree that there's plenty of things about Putin's Russia, as I articulated before. I think there's plenty of things about Putin's Russia that I think are grotesque. But first of all, we have to look at the role that the West played. As much as Evan would like to deny this, we need to look at the role that the West played in creating that situation. Why is Russia like this? Russia was a progressive, pluralistic, socialist society, and that was too much for us because that was a threat to our economic interests and our economic status quo. And we spent decades and decades and decades and billions of dollars overthrowing that system, leading to this modern version of Russia featuring all these like regressive and reactionary cultural touchstones, which Evan is pointing out here. So that's kind of what I would say about that. You know? And as an anti-imperialist, and you point out the West's role as the world's foremost hegemon and imperialist power, whether you don't need to support the Russian government to recognize the fact that it's providing a counter and opposition to Western imperialism. And that's just the reality. I would prefer that Russia was still socialist. I would prefer to have an anti-Western alliance that was based in socialism, that was based in where the Soviet Union still existed. Well, that doesn't exist anymore because of Western imperialism, because Western imperialism destroyed this. So this is the anti-Western alliance that exists such as it is. So if you're anti-imperialist, you just have to grapple with that. You have to grapple with all the contradictions and all the dialectics that are inherent to that. Tankies, and again, showing how serious of a journalist with he is by calling me a fucking tanky. For, again, all of this little outburst on the part of Evan here was in reaction to me saying what Lula is saying in this clip that you're sharing is what the entire rest of the world believes. That's what I was saying. And in Evan's little tantrum here, which was not directed to me, but some other guy, of course, that's all with what that it's in reference to, just to be clear about that as well. My totally benign and factual statement that most people around the world recognize Lula's statement for being completely accurate. Tankies automatically take the anti-Western and/or authoritarian side in any conflict. They also have a Pavlovian reaction to the Putinist use of hammer and sickle symbolism. Are they even using any? I don't think they're using hammer and sickle symbolism at all. I mean, Putin, in the lead up to the invasion, specifically talked shit about Lenin and fucking threw Lenin under the bus and talked about how it was Lenin's fault in the first place for creating Ukraine and carving it out as its own kind of separate nationalist identity. So what? They're specifically going against that kind of symbolism. So what the fuck's he talking about? Putin himself, a massive anti-communist who I pointed out before, benefited personally from the collapse of the Soviet Union. I would like them to use more hammer and sickle symbolism, frankly, but they're not doing that. The Russian troops do use the Soviet flag a lot. Okay, well, maybe that's a part of it. Is this where I finally got involved here? Okay. This is Evan was quite on one here before I even had interacting with me and engaging in any way with my main point, which again is just inarguably true. The fact that the rest of the world believes this about the conflict. I suppose we also have this is a good point as well, Cinnamon Challenge. I suppose we also have a Pavlovian response to all the fascist imagery that the Ukrainian soldiers use. Exactly. I think we do, yeah. Which Evan just says is some fantasy. He just dismisses that as being some kind of fantasy. But what if Russia attacked a country that the US didn't use as a proxy for 8 years? You tankies would probably support that. Yeah, exactly. What if this was totally different? I'm sure you'd support the same thing. Okay, well, we're not talking about Iceland, though. We're talking about this situation, which has a very clear, documented record of heavy involvement of these Western powers. So this whole Iceland thing makes no fucking sense because that's just a completely different situation, which is not happening, versus the situation that is happening that we're discussing now. Yes.
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
Metal Dipshit, thank you very much for the 5 gifted subs. I really appreciate that, Metal Dipshit. Thank you. Oh boy. I'm going to have to blow my nose again soon. So then this guy gets involved, Gordon Cook. Bless you, Gordon. I don't know if Gordon's part of the community or not. He says, you just demonstrated the idiocy of using the term tanky to refer to the anti-war left. They call for peace talks while you call for literal tanks to be sent. Very good point, Gordon. It says they're calling for surrender followed by ratification of the territorial gains achieved through armed aggression. They're calling for a perpetuation of the current occupation, which is the opposite of peace. They're not anti-war. They are pro-invasion. And again, that's just false as well. As I've said many times, I'm not pro-invasion. But as I talked about this yesterday, here's the reality that people like Evan don't want to reckon with. There was a time when those eastern regions could have remained part of Ukraine. There was plenty of opportunity for that to happen. If the Minsk agreements had been followed, none of this would have ever happened, which Russia was negotiating in good faith. None of this shit ever had to happen. The reality, though, now is those regions are gone now. They're not coming back. They're just not going to come back. You don't have to support Putin or support the invasion to just recognize this basic fact. They're not going to happen. It's not happening. Thank you, Metal Dipshit, again. Thank you for stopping by. Take care. Same with Crimea. All this shit about the war can only end. The war can only end when they give back those eastern regions in the Crimea. It's not going to happen. So it's in fact Evan that is arguing for endless war versus a situation where there's a ceasefire and peace and no more violence and bloodshed. That's the reality. Those are the two options. Endless war, endless bloodshed and quagmire, or you call a ceasefire. You admit to yourself and everyone else that those regions are gone and are not coming back, and everyone can stop dying and killing each other. These are the two options that are on the table. Evan supports the perpetual war side. I support the ceasefire side. So yes, it is anti-war. Yeah, and does Evan really want to see what happens if the Donbass was to be put back in the hands of Zelensky and his fascist fucks? That's absolutely right. I mean, if you think that would be a great situation, or that wouldn't involve horrific amounts of retribution and violence in and of itself, I mean, that's just completely delusional. If you don't want an invasion, don't lay down the red carpet of conditions where it could be reasonably assumed Russia would react harshly. Again, Mikey, like we've been talking about, people have been saying for years, we're leading. That's why that Mearsheimer clip is so important. Mearsheimer was saying years ago, we're leading Ukraine down the primrose path. If we keep doing this, Ukraine's going to get wrecked. He wasn't saying that because he thinks Putin is great or because he's a tanky or he's a Kremlin propagandist. He was just stating a basic reality. If we keep doing what we're doing right now, Ukraine's going to get wrecked. Well, lo and behold, that's what happened. So now we can accept that, accept our responsibility in that, and we can work to stop the bloodshed. Or, like bloodthirsty, droney Evan wants, we can continue that conflict can continue endlessly, and we can let's even escalate it even more. Let's escalate it to nuclear war. Let's escalate it to World War III, because that's what it's going to take to return those regions that now Russia has spent the last year securing. And if people really would rather have World War III over these like eastern regions in Ukraine that they're not in any way connected to, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I don't think we should have World War III over like the Donetsk and Luhansk and these eastern republics filled predominantly with Russian-speaking people who were getting shelled for the last 10 years with NATO weapons. I don't think we should have World War III over these eastern regions in Ukraine. And I don't understand all these Western people who have zero connection to these territories who are willing to like escalate that to that level because Russia bad. You know, that to me is fucking psychotic. When I was a child, my mom told me to stop putting my hands and fingers near my dog's mouth and annoying it. When the dog finally bit me, my mom channeled her inner tanky and said, well, I told you so. Well, your mom supports the authoritarian regime of your dog not wanting to be fucking annoyed endlessly. So here's where I chimed in, because this is after the stream yesterday. I noticed that all this conversation was going on. I didn't even realize because I don't follow Evan, so I wasn't getting these notifications. So this is where I chimed in because I was like, oh, okay. I see Evan actually responded to some of these things, although, again, not to me, but to some other guy, some random dude. So here's where I chimed in. So let's see this now. This is such a long time of setting this up. I did not think this segment was going to be so long. But let's now look at once I got back involved in this conversation, and we can look at this little back and forth that I had with Evan, and we can talk about who came out on top. And I know maybe some of you might be biased, but let's really dig into this. Just give me one brief moment, though. I'm just going to blow my nose again. I'm so sorry. I'm going to do that and get maybe another beverage, and then I'll come back in just a sec. So just hold that thought. Don't go anywhere. Give me like 2 minutes, and I'll be back, and we'll talk about it some more. Okay, I'm back. Sorry. This really sucks. I'm really tired of feeling this way. My lungs are really like clogged up, and I'm like wheezing. It's fucking not good shit. Ugh. I think my mic was a lot turned down more than it usually is as well today. It's not COVID, it's just a cold. Ugh, okay. So, as I was saying, this was yesterday at 3:30. This is right after I finished the stream. And I finished the stream yesterday. I had just talked about Evan's comments previously, but I hadn't noticed that he was like responding to it. So this was as soon as I finished the stream, I saw that he was responding. I was like, okay. I saw his fucking sanctimonious comments and his like, I think somewhat slanderous and accusations that I'm this tanky that supports authoritarianism, despite, again, everything that I just looked at Evan saying was in response to me saying, commenting on that clip that he was sharing of Lula, simply saying that the West was responsible for provoking this. The West has played a role in prolonging this conflict, and just pointing out this is what most of the world believes. All that bullshit that Evan was saying over those last like few paragraphs was in response to that. So it didn't reckon with that basic point. You'll notice that that's going to be a common theme here. Not reckoning with the action or responding to in any way the basic point that I'm making. And instead, obfuscating and ducking and dodging and doing everything he possibly can to avoid dealing with the actual points that I'm making here. Ugh. So here I came in. I said that NATO played a role in provoking the conflict through the Euromaidan, to the arming and funding of neo-Nazi militias, to ignoring the Minsk peace agreements. The Minsk peace agreements is just an inarguable truth, which most of the world recognizes. There's been plenty of legitimate reporting on this, Evan. And again, when I try to have these conversations, like I try not to be a dick to people anymore. I think there was a time on Twitter where I would be like, fuck you or whatever. But I try to generally be polite, even if I am.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Ideas. Tankies for Rob.
Thank you, Cutman, for the 20 months tier 1. Thank you, Cutman. I appreciate that. So I said you ignore all this or hand wave it away because you, whether you realize it or not, are a propagandist for the rules-based international order that the U.S. is in charge of and Canada is a junior partner in. Here's what he said. Evan says, I support a rules-based order called international law. Whether it's invasions of Ukraine or Iraq or occupations of Mariupol or Bethlehem. No double standards. You cannot claim the same consistency. You condemn it when Washington does it, but support it when it's the Kremlin. And again, I don't support it, but what I do point out is the role that the West played in provoking it, which, as I pointed out, is what most of the world believes. As I pointed out, there's tons of mainstream reporting on it. And again, you'll see Evan not reckoning with any of that, just completely ignoring that whole context. They're saying you condemn it when it's Washington, but you support it when it's the Kremlin, while totally ignoring the heavily documented role that, yes, Washington and Ottawa played in this conflict and many other conflicts as well. So I said, what does international law say about helping to overthrow the Ukrainian government in 2014 and then spending the next decade providing billions of dollars worth of arms and training to openly neo-Nazi militias who were shelling and killing civilians? And again, this is not some opinion of mine. This is not some Kremlin conspiracy theory. There's tons of mainstream reporting about all of this stuff. And I look at this similar to the whole Syria argument as well. You talk about Assad and Syria and terrible things that have happened in the Syrian civil war, right? And my point of that has always been well, you can't just blame one side for terrible things that happened in a war when we're arming and funding the other side of that war. You don't have to. You can say, yeah, Assad has done terrible things in this war, which I don't think that's disputable. But we're arming and funding these extreme reactionaries, and like Evan points out in this tweet about Afghanistan, these fundamentalists. Well, in Syria, we're arming and funding these reactionary fundamentalists to fight in this war, where inevitably these terrible things were happening. So we're deeply implicated in that. So when you're talking about international law, what does international law say about us, the West, the United States and Canada, pumping arms to materially support one side of a civil war that we have nothing to do with? Is that just totally fine? Is that totally okay to do under international law? I genuinely would like to know. This invasion, again, did not just happen in February of 2022. And you can say, yeah, it's illegal to invade another country according to international law. Okay. And I will accept that and acknowledge it. But is it legal under international law to openly support and arm and train and fund one side of a civil war in a certain region, whether it's eastern Ukraine or Syria or Yemen? These are just 3 current examples, or Libya is another example. Is it applicable to international law? Is it legal under international law, that framework, to arm and fund civil wars in regions that have nothing to do with us? That's kind of my question here. What does international law say about helping to overthrow the Ukrainian government in 2014 and then spending the next decade providing billions of dollars worth of arms and training to openly neo-Nazi militias who are shelling and killing civilians? Again, this is not controversial. This is not controversial. This is what has been happening. None of these people ever called for the same rules to be enforced when any of the other mentioned countries did similar things. Yeah, and Evan points to Iraq, right? Evan likes to point to Iraq as an example of his objectivity. Ukraine or Iraq, no double standards. So that's Evan's kind of like get out of jail free card. He says, well, the Iraq war was illegal. The Ukraine war, the war against Ukraine is illegal. Again, I'm interested to know, and maybe someone can, does he support sanctions against the U.S.? Does he support war crimes trials against George W. Bush? I don't really think so. If he does, I don't think he's mentioned it too much. And again, I'm interested to know whether Evan Dyer in 2003 was suggesting that the war was illegal and pushing back against it. Maybe he was. If he was, I would love to see the Evan Dyer articles and commentary that he was doing 20 years ago calling the Iraq war illegal. Or does he just sit here in 2023 and say, oh yeah, of course it was illegal, now that it's like totally non-controversial to say that? When it actually mattered, was Evan saying that? I don't know. I kind of doubt it, though. What does Evan think about our involvement in Afghanistan post 9/11? Well, according to this tweet here, he seems to think that it was justified because of the fundamentalist rule in Afghanistan and the Taliban and not letting girls go to school and the human rights issues there. So it kind of seems like he thinks it was justified because of the Afghanistan regime, the Taliban that was in place. What was the Taliban doing there? Well, again, as much as Evan doesn't want to admit it, the West literally did impose that on the people of Afghanistan. And when there was an alternative system to that was being created with the PDPA in the late 70s, we armed and funded these very
You can count on me.
fundamentalists.
You're going to have good old Rob to talk you
from
through all
happening.
this.
In an exact similar situation, in an almost identical situation to what's going on currently in Ukraine. Thank you, Diego. Thank you, Diego, for another gifted sub to Updragon. I really appreciate that, Diego. Thank you. So that's his kind of get out of jail free card. Iraq's illegal. Was Evan calling Iraq illegal in 2003? I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure that he was. Do you think there's a mentality now that if a concession is made for Putin, he'll see this as an opportunity to try something similar to the invasion? I mean, that's the narrative that people have been using to justify their position that there should be no possible negotiation or whatever. But no, I don't think so. I think in the same way that, like, that's, you only believe that if you think Putin is Hitler, and Putin is like trying to, as our friend earlier in the chat was trying to say, trying to reestablish the Russian Empire. And if he's just going to be emboldened and go into all these other places. He's in Ukraine because of this very specific set of conditions. And Russia did try to avoid that situation for quite a long time before finally committing to do this invasion. So I don't think there's any evidence of that whatsoever. I mean, they've had a hard enough time over the last year and a half securing their gains in Ukraine. I don't think Russia has a ton of appetite to continue that, like, moving beyond that. I really don't. But I know that's a very commonly held belief for people that are in this kind of like, we must never back down, we must fight to the last Ukrainian kind of viewpoint. Evan says you condemn it when Washington does it, but support it when it's the Kremlin. So I asked, what does international law say about helping to overthrow the Ukrainian government in 2014? And then spending the next decade providing billions of dollars worth of arms and training to openly neo-Nazi militias who were shelling and killing civilians. This Evan is very tricky guy. So he says, simultaneously, international law is very clear on that, actually, Rob. It says countries are not allowed to invade other countries. That is why the U.S. invasion of Iraq was illegal. Countries are fully entitled to defend themselves and take action on their own soil to recover stolen land. So no actual answer to this, right? Zero effort to actually engage with that point whatsoever, or engage with my other point about how most of the world believes that it was provoked. Zero effort to engage with this. He just says, invasion bad, Russia bad. That's his only answer. Completely, like, as much as he's saying, you imagine this Nazi problem, you imagine Western involvement. When I say, what about these specific examples, these specific documented examples of Western involvement? Do we share any blame for that? Zero answer. Zero effort to respond to that in any way. And here's where I get the fucking sanctimonious lecture. And listen, I try to be respectful. I try to be respectful with Evan here or anyone else that I argue with about this. And I say that's not a response to what I asked. And this fucking, I'm sorry, Evan, but you're a condescending prick, sir. This is fucking condescending bullshit. Still not answering any of my questions. And he says, I think you should probably A, learn more about international law and why it exists, B, examine your double standards, and C, ask yourself why your double standards consistently operate in favor of dictatorships and rights-abusing regimes and against democracies. So, I mean, you see the ideology right there in that last thing, right? The dictatorships and rights-abusing regimes and against democracies like Canada and the United States, who, of course, are not rights-abusing and, of course, are not authoritarian. So you see the ideology right there just in the language that he uses and who qualifies as being a democracy and who doesn't, and who qualifies as being, authoritarian and who doesn't, and who qualifies as being rights-abusing and who does not. So here's my final response to Evan here. And again, as I said, if you're going to be sanctimonious with me, if you want to if you think you can out passive aggressive me, if you want to try and give me a sanctimonious, condescending lecture, well, guess what? I can give that right back. So I said, thanks. While we're giving suggestions, you should examine how terms like democracy, human rights, and authoritarianism are weaponized to uphold an exploitative world order. And B, stop obscuring the role of the global hegemon in international affairs like the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And finally, C, use your platform to more forcefully advocate for the right of Palestinians to engage in armed struggle in illegal Israeli settlements, which you agree is legal under international law. Right? Because that goes back to this point that he made here. Countries are fully entitled to defend themselves and take action on their own soil to recover stolen land. Again, I've heard that Evan is better on Israel-Palestine than many other journalists in this country. I don't know that I've seen any arguments from Evan openly advocating for the right, the legal right, which he recognizes here, which he agrees is legal under international law, the legal right for Palestinians to engage in armed struggle, to take action on their own soil to recover stolen land. The Israeli settlements are illegal. There's illegal, under international law, Israeli settlements that go beyond the borders that have been agreed upon. These settlements are illegal. So under Evan's own definition, is apparently like fucking genius interpretation, his complex grasp, his total iron-fisted grasp on international law and these concepts. Under that definition, Palestinians have the legal right to, as he says, take action on their own soil to recover stolen land. Has Evan ever articulated that? And if he has, I would love to see that. And if that's true, I would be interested to know whether his bosses at CBC know that that's what he believes, because I don't think that's a very commonly held belief among CBC journalists, that Palestinians have the right to engage in armed struggle in these occupied illegal settlements. Or do indigenous people in Canada and the United States, do the Wet'suwet'en have that right? They're being military occupied. They're a sovereign people. Their land is being occupied. All the treaties that they signed were all bullshit in the first place. And they're being, the terms of the treaties are being constantly violated. They're being threatened with the RCMP and state violence. Do the Wet'suwet'en have the right, the legal right under international law, to pick up an AK-47 and engage in armed struggle against settlers in Canada and the United States? I'd be interested to know if Evan has ever articulated that viewpoint. Or is it just Ukrainians? Is it just Ukrainians that have this right to defend themselves and take action to recover the stolen land? I'd be interested to see. I don't think I've ever seen Evan ever make this argument about Palestinians or indigenous people in Canada and the United States. Evan really going off today. Maybe I set him off on this. Evan. From a Reuters article, he's claiming Reuters now is communist Cuban propaganda. The headline is Cuban President Diaz-Canel expected to win second term despite crises. He says, this article reads like it was written by the Cuban Communist Party. An ill-informed person reading it might think he or she is reading about a real democratic election. Again, who qualifies it? It's only a Western-style liberal democracy. That's the only possible form of democracy. Any system outside of that is authoritarian, according to non-biased, non-partisan journalist Evan. And I must say, Evan, you're not a journalist. You know this. Evan, you're not a journalist. You know this. I think that's the end of my rant. That's the end of the interaction that I had with Evan Dyer. I think you will agree. I don't want to speak for you, chat, but I think you will agree that I did own Evan in the marketplace of ideas. The likes have spoken. I'm sure you'll agree. But is it me who propagandized? No, they must be uninformed. That's right. He's a bootlicker mouthpiece for the status quo. It's unfortunately true. I tried to make a dent in Evan's programming. I tried to make a dent in Evan's fucking programming. I know Evan is someone that would think that we don't have state media. He works for CBC. CBC is not state media. They're having this freak out now about Elon Musk describing them as being government funded, which is true. I fucking hate Elon Musk, but that is true. And I'm sure Evan would say that he's non-biased, he's non-partisan.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
You see in this interaction, you see the ideology.
Fun times.
Red Eastby, thank you for the 2 months tier 1. Thank you, Red Eastby. So you see the ideology in this argument. You see it pop out, and you see that Evan Dyer, no matter how much he claims to the contrary, he is a stenographer for the state, for our current status quo. And then maybe he's nonpartisan, but he's still a stenographer for the power structure in this country. Evan is literally mad at Trudeau for not being anti-Cuba enough. But Evan doesn't have ideology. Trudeau government's position on democracy in the Americas remains confused and contradictory. It sanctions Nicaragua and Venezuela, but calls the most complete one-party state in the hemisphere, Cuba, an ally. His government is loath to criticize as it jails its youth for asking for change. Oh, Evan. Oh, Evan. Evan, you're not a journalist. You know this. I would really be interested to see what Evan was saying about Iraq in 2003. I don't know if there's any way to find that out. I don't really feel like Googling it now. Anyway, folks, I got to take a break from talking. I really do. I guess the stupid Elon Musk. We can just take a look at the Elon Musk CBC. Like, it's so stupid. Like, I think this is an important point to talk about, the fact that we do indeed have state media and propaganda in our society, and this distinction between state-controlled media when it's in another country versus CBC and BBC not getting it. But it's like, I fucking hate that it's Elon Musk, the most pathetic, unfunny loser, the one making this point for entirely the wrong reasons, you know? It's very annoying. It's very annoying. And as I talked about in this tweet, and as we talked about up front at the beginning of this conversation, you know, it's all state media. It's all state media. If you live in a capitalist country, when capitalists own your media, as Lenin tells us, then it is automatic. It's a capitalist press. It's a corrupt press. And as our friend here, Remuskin Red, points out, our boy said it best: for the bourgeoisie, freedom of the press meant freedom for the rich to publish and for the capitalists to control the newspapers, a practice which in all countries, including even the freest, produced a corrupt press. You know, sometimes that guy said some pretty smart things. Sometimes that guy knew what he was talking about. So, folks, I really have to take a break from talking now. It's been another fucking 2 hours of now just straight talking nonstop, which I said that I was not going to do today. If you want to support this content, though, as you know, I'm not state-funded media. I would take money from a state if they were willing to throw it at me. So far, I've received no such offers. All these viewpoints that I have are completely independently held. I'm not funded by the Kremlin or by Cuba or China or any of these authoritarian one-party states. This program is entirely funded by the listeners and the viewers of the stream, which is something that really means a lot to me, that there's a community of people out here that support the work that I do and appreciate this commentary. So if you want to support TRRS, if you think this kind of commentary is a good thing to have as part of our sort of media ecosystem, this small little corner of Twitch that I've managed to carve out, I encourage you to please subscribe to TRRS. It's $5 per month or completely free of charge with an Amazon Prime account. Please subscribe or gift subs or friend coin or subscribe on Patreon or tip or whatever other way you want to do it. Every little bit helps. The only way that this content and this commentary that I do is able to exist here on Twitch is through the extreme generosity of the little community that's formed around the show. So if you do enjoy the show, please subscribe. However, or just any support that you can possibly give.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
It means a lot.
Slub to rib.
And it's literally the only way that I can continue doing this, because it's not like CBC is going to hire me, even though I've got a way bigger social media presence than Evan, even though I have the ability to sit here and host a radio and video program for 4 hours live every single day, even though I have a number of skills that I could apply to that.
We
kind
simply
of thing.
use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Power, and that's not
These
what
bits
CBC
are
is
courtesy
interested
of our CIA handler. You're welcome. Cool story, Bob. Hope you feel better, BTW.
Sin Chow, thank you very much for the 300 friend coin. Thank you, Sin Chow. I really appreciate it. And thank you also to Useless Teammate for the 500 friend coin, courtesy of our CIA handler. Well, hell yeah. We love it. We love it. Thank you.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
And thank you, Ben and PS, as well, for the gifted sub. Thank you. I really, really appreciate all the support that people in this community show. Again, it means a lot to me that I'm able to earn a small living from doing this program every day. Again, I would love to have a job in media in this country. I know I'm smart enough to do it. I know I have the ability to do it. I've got a social media platform. I really would rather get a legitimate job in journalism and not have to rely on people in this community to fund the work that I do. But again, because we do have a state media apparatus that is not interested in broadcasting this perspective, that's not an option for me, no matter what qualifications I may have. I would genuinely I would prefer that than to have to try and come on here and get the fine folks that listen to this program to support it. But this is the reality of our media system, that regardless of what qualifications I have or what social media platform I have, which again is bigger than, I would say, 95% of mainstream journalists in this country, despite the fact that I can get clicks, despite the fact that I can articulate these viewpoints, despite the fact that we're supposed to have a marketplace of ideas that has different perspectives and different viewpoints, that's not an option for me to get a job at CBC or Global News or the National Post or any of these things. This is all that is available to me. I would love to be proven wrong on this. Excuse me. When I win the lottery, you'll be the Canadian correspondent for my leftist media network. That would be wonderful. I'd be happy to do that. Alerts are overpowering you. Yeah, I realized too late that my mic was turned down a little bit more. So what did you find here, Marty? Gin Dyer? A review on his book about Iraq. So who are we talking about here? Is this one of Evan's like relatives, or what's the connection? Because that's definitely interesting. If it's Evan's dad. Okay. Read it if you thought this war was about oil. It gives the lie to that canard. This war is more than anything else about hubris and economic spoils from mega corporations. So many brave, irreplaceable, and fundamentally decent American soldiers are paying for this folly. Definitely an interesting way of framing that. Evan's dad, a war military strategist. He was a Canadian columnist. Okay, it is his father. Okay. That's very interesting. Very, very interesting. Ugh. Yeah, the folly of empire line. He also addresses them as bumbling into Iraq, and maybe they'll learn their lesson, which sounds a complete forgiving of the brutality and decisiveness used in the situation. Yeah, and again, saying all the American troops are paying the price while not talking about the significantly, vastly larger number of Iraqis that paid a much heavier price. Okay. So what do I have to look at here? Any other takers? Any other takers on subscribing to the show? Did he talk about Evan Dyer yet, or did I just miss it? Walmart Inc. I just spent basically 2 straight hours talking about Evan Dyer and my little interaction that I had with them, unfortunately. But I will clip it, or you can just catch the VOD, and you can. We really got a deep dive into this. Let's go again. Let's start over from scratch. I'm literally too sick to be still doing this. Evan's dad married a white South African. That's interesting as well. Rob, I used to be a fan of your Twitter, but after your recent Ukraine Nazi takes, I just had to unfollow. Unfortunately, I've expressed the wrong Kremlin propaganda that I think sending billions of dollars worth of weapons to Nazis is a bad thing to do, which I don't support. That's my big controversial viewpoint. What has this been? Let me take a look here. I might have to actually just go soon, honestly. I wanted to stick around longer. I would like to stick around longer and try to get to the sub goal and everything, but I feel like shit. I might have to just go soon. 35% of UK prime ministers have been educated at one school, Eton. This is an entrance exam question set by the school in 2011. And I think this is talking about state media and the state apparatus. This is an interesting perspective as well. It's worth recounting the exam question in full to give you a sense of what exactly the college was asking of 12 to 13-year-old boys. The year is 2040. There have been riots in the streets of London after Britain has run out of petrol because of an oil crisis in the Middle East. Protesters have attacked public buildings. Several policemen have died. Consequently, the government has deployed the army to curb the protests. After 2 days, the protests have been stopped, but 25 protesters have been killed by the army. You're the prime minister. Write the script for a speech to be broadcast to the nation, in which you explain why employing the army against violent protesters was the only option available to you, and one which was both necessary and moral. Okay, wow. So not even asking to kind of take a side on that, but literally saying, you know what side you're on. And yeah, that makes sense. And a lot of I think it's this understanding too, like you look at the militarization of police and this like increasing rise of fascism in our own society. The ruling class is well aware that like they're going to start to lose grip as the empire continues to like slide into the toilet, that there is going to be public unrest. You know, they got the first taste of that with the George Floyd protests and all that. And I think it's like they're very, very ready for the real war to begin. And they're getting ready they're putting power structure in place to deal with that when it happens. If you thought differently, you wouldn't be sitting here. It looks like another, and there's another quote that I wanted to look at that someone posted. Just give me a moment to find that. Yeah, this was great. I thought this was really great. The NPR, because we're switching, because it's CBC and NPR, they're all horrified by this designation that they're state affiliated. And I think this coincides with what we just looked about the British PM and all this stuff. You know, it's the big club. It's not, you don't have to be an unhinged conspiracy theory to talk about people having class interests, the people that rule our society. It's not a conspiracy. This is really interesting, this quote here. The NPR horror at being labeled state-affiliated media seems to stem from a misunderstanding of how media messaging is controlled. They seem to expect pre-written articles handed to them personally from the Oval Office, when it's typically more like in this Gore Vidal interview. This is really fascinating. Listen to this. It's from a Playboy interview with Gore Vidal. It says, that's stock left-wing rhetoric. Wouldn't you admit that America is far less class-defined than many other Western countries? Vidal says, that's the genius of our ruling class. They're so brilliant that no one knows they even exist. The political science professors, perfectly sane men, look at me with wonder when I talk about the ruling class in America. They say you're one of those conspiracy theorists. You think there's a headquarters and they get together at the Bohemian Grove and run the United States. Well, they do get together at the Bohemian Grove and do a lot of picking of secretaries of state anyway, but they don't have to conspire. They all think alike. It goes back to the way we're raised. The schools we went to, after all, I'm a reluctant member of this group. You don't have to give orders to the editor of the New York Times. He's in place because he will respond to a crisis the way you want him to, as will the president, as will the head of the Chase Manhattan Bank. You don't have to look for some big labyrinthine conspiracy. You know, you don't have to look at this like the smoke-filled rooms and these lizard shape-shifting things that these fucked up right-wing anti-Semites get into. You know, it's just a big club, as George Carlin points out as well. You know, these people, they go to the same schools. They're part of the same secret society in these schools. They're groomed from cradle to grave to be part of the ruling class of our society. They go into powerful media positions in the media, in the government, in the banking system, in all over these different powerful apparatuses. And they know what they need to do. They know what their job is. They know how to look out for each other's class interests. They don't need to do these big elaborate conspiracies, even though there is elements of that as well. Look at Bohemian Grove. Look at the Epstein shit. There's weird, fucked up, dark, conspiratorial shit that does indeed happen. But you don't even need to look at that stuff. These people know what their job is. There is a pipeline from people to go from they're from powerful families. Many of these families, the power going back generations and generations. This idea that you can just come from nothing and become one of these people, while it does sometimes happen, it's very, very rare. Many of these people come from families that have been extremely wealthy and powerful for going back to the foundation of these nations and beyond. And they're the same families. They go to the same schools. They have the same friends. They go to the same country clubs, and they know how to look out for each other's class interests. It's not a big, vast conspiracy. There's just a pipeline to put people in powerful positions in our society. There's a whole ruling class pipeline to put people in these positions, and they know what their job is. They know how to look out for each other's class interests. They don't need to be told what to do. Even though sometimes they do indeed conspire in the smoke-filled rooms.
That's the, yeah, you have to give them credit for one thing. You have to give them credit. They're out in the open now. They're out in the open now. They're not even trying to conceal it anymore. The owners of the country they got their election. They said, we're going to get this election. We put you people in that court for a reason.
Right,
now's
back
the time
to
to pay
earth
us.
for you now.
Yeah, forget all that stupid, will you? They're out in the open. They're openly driving the bus, and we're all in the back.
There is no national conspiracy to buy elections and control America. Now
Talk about back to earth.
That's part of the problem. That's part of the problem that we have, is that people make these kind of irrational statements.
Unfortunately, George Bush has the right to put anyone he wants in his cabinet. It's our shame on us for electing him.
You're right.
Shame on you.
That's right. You're absolutely right.
Shame on everyone who voted for Ralph Nader. We can thank Ralph.
Oh, blame it on Ralph
blaming fucking Nader.
Right.
Why?
Julie Warner probably supports George Bush now. If you look at if you look at this very lady who's blaming Ralph Nader for Bush.
Voted for Ralph Nader. We can thank Ralph.
Oh, blame it on.
She probably loves Bush now and thinks he's great that he gave candies to Michelle Obama or whatever.
Ralph Nader. Right.
Why? Everyone who voted for him blew the election, and everyone said Gore and Bush.
Al Gore blew the election. Because
Mayor Mar W.
Okay.
Because he was so afraid that Monica.
The point that I meant to make.
They're out in the open. They're openly driving the bus, and we're all in the back.
There is no performance.
They're out in the open now. They're not even trying to conceal it anymore.
Right.
Why? Everyone.
Grounds are there. What I check this quick point. What we haven't had is a serious question. Liberals.
You can have blackout.
Need to the same university.
Not as a result of a conspiracy, but because
you don't need a formal conspiracy.
Right.
When interests converge, these people went to the same universities and fraternities. They're on the same boards of directors. They're in the same country clubs. They have like interests. They don't need to call a meeting. They know what's good for them, and they're getting it. And there used to be 7 oil companies. There are now 3. It will soon be 2. The things that matter in this country have been reduced in choice. There are 2 political parties. There are a handful of insurance companies. There are about 6 or 7 information things. But if you want a bagel, there are 23 flavors because you have the illusion. You have the illusion of choice.
Right.
You don't get the real important choice. There's no freedom of choice.
You know, I don't want to be one of these people that just, it's kind of become this dumb cliche, this dude bro thing about stand-up comedians being the arbiters of truth and philosophy or whatever, but he was one of the ones that I think can make a legitimate claim to that. And whenever this discussion comes up, I always love looking at this clip because Carlin was so great at outlining this. Carlin wasn't a Leninist, certainly, but I think he's very good at outlining that exact kind of people defending their class interests, That's where you see Marxism as a science, as we've talked about before. It helps to read Marx and Lenin, and you should, but you don't have to read Marx and Lenin if you're an observant person and you understand when people are protecting their own class interests, as he did there. I don't think he's a Marxist, but that's a Marxist concept, which is why it is a science. I gotta go. All right. I know it's early. I wanted to stick around longer. I still feel sick. I should, in the interest of filling up the sub goal and everything, I should stick around probably, but I feel like shit and I've talked enough and I would like to go now. So I'm going to call it for the day. I think that's a good place to leave it though. Very good place to leave it. About 5 more minutes to, if anyone does want to subscribe to the program or support the work that I do here, maybe we could get above 20 subs. That would be kind of good. That'd be kind of all right if we were to do that. But if not, it's okay. Again, I know it's I should just stick around and try and do it more, but I just don't feel up to it. So I said today, I'm not gonna talk for 2 straight hours about this shit. I'm gonna try and take it easy. And then lo and behold, I did rant and rave for 2 straight hours about this stuff. Joe Rogan opened a free speech comedy club in Austin where they do face scans at the entrance and you get thrown out if you heckle. Yeah, probably featuring such brilliant subversive ideas like trans people are in sports, and I don't like it. That's probably the big subversive free speech subjects that are being discussed there. I just remembered when we tried to raid Adam Cole the other day, and I fucked it up. That was funny. I raided David Tovarich yesterday. You know what? Maybe this is a bit of a detour ideologically, but you know what? I do love the Majority Report with Sam Sater, and I often get raids from them. So let's go ahead and raid the Majority Report. You know, I still love, even though I might disagree sometimes with their analysis, I think overall I still really enjoy Sam Sater and the Majority Report, and I do often get raids from them, which I appreciate a lot. So let's raid the Majority Report with Sam Sater. R.I.P. Michael Brooks. We miss Michael. I do really think Michael would be solid on this issue. I think we really miss Michael's viewpoint especially over the last year and a half, and I think he would have made it a lot easier to understand for some of these people that have been a little uncomfortable talking about this whole Russia-Ukraine thing. I think Michael would have really helped to show people the way on that. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks for watching. I'll be back tomorrow. You know, I'm still under the weather, but I will be back tomorrow. And that's all. Okay? Danger Dave Ball, you just missed. They banned me from Jedford show quoting Chomsky. Oh my god. Yeah, don't do a meme raid, okay? We're being nice. They don't even really acknowledge the chat anyways, but I just want to show some love to Majority Report, considering like Matt Leck and I think is the one that's often raiding this channel, which I do appreciate. Be respectful. Thank you. I'll see you folks tomorrow.